You know, I'm going to give you a history lesson.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
Stop laughing! And when I do, start fucking.
Also, y'all did some nasty ass jokes on my ass, too.
Funny jokes and unfunny jokes come out of the same birth.
You fucking guys are unbelievable.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast. And today, I am pleased to introduce to you the legendary Redd Foxx, a guy I did not know a lot about and a guy I'm extremely interested in. I was actually excited to record this episode today. It's one of those that, I hope you guys clicked on, even if you're not too familiar with his work, because I think he lived a very interesting life. In many ways, a tragic life. It's a bit of a rise and fall story, but the guy definitely had a tremendous amount of influence in the comedy world, particularly with black comics from, the 50s all the way up until, I would say, the late 90s, early 2000s. Were influenced by Redd Foxx for sure, and even some still today. But we will get into all of it right after I let you know that if you want to support the show, you can do it for free by subscribing on any platform you get podcasts, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you're listening to us right now. And if that happens to be on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, tap the notification bell, all that good stuff. Helps us, in the algorithm and everything. Helps boost those numbers, baby. And if you'd like to throw a few bucks behind the program, then check out the Patreon. We do bonus episodes every month. We just had a few go up, including Opie and Anthony's Homeless Charlie incident, Artie Lang's appearance on Joe Buck Live, his infamous destruction of that program, as well as many others we've done. Opie and Jim, or Opie versus Jim, Tucker Max, Donald Glover's Weirdo, Norm on The View, all kinds of good stuff we've been doing on the Patreon. So if you want to check out those episodes, as well as get these a week early, then make sure you subscribe to the Patreon if you'd be so kind. And let's get into it. Redd Foxx, like I said, lived a very interesting and kind of lived the. Did you ever see the ESPN 30 for 30? I think it was called like Broke or something like that.
No.
With all the athletes that lost all their money.
Oh, no, that would suck to watch.
Yeah, Redd Foxx is the kind of the comedy version of that. I hate to spoil it for people, but bad news is coming.
Not this again.
Red.
Spoilers again, Mike.
I know. I'm sorry, but it's out there if you look at it. So Redd Foxx was born in St. Louis, grew up for the most part in Chicago, and his father left when he was very young. That seems to be a common thing in the world of comedy. I'd say less so now, like with the current crop of comedians, it's probably not quite as typical, but in the early days of comedy, it's almost everyone. They had either no father or no mother, or one was extremely abusive or never really there. My favorite story being Jackie Gleason's father, who threw out all the pictures of him before he left. So the family would have no memory of his existence. But in Redd's case, the father skipped town, and then the mother bailed on him as well. The mother dropped Redd and his brother Fred off. Oh, by the way, I should mention Redd's real name is John Sanford, John McElroy Sanford, I think. So that's where Sanford comes from. And his father's name is Fred Sanford, his brother being Fred Jr. So when I first read that, I was like, that's odd. Is the character named after the dad that bailed on him? But it was to honor his brother. That's where Fred G. Sanford comes from. So Redd and his brother grew up with, for at least a few years, with the grandmother, because the mom went to Chicago, and then eventually the grandmother of Redd Foxx said, "Enough of this, raise your fucking kids," and brought him back to the mother. So yeah, kind of a turbulent childhood. He resented his mother for that. He said even at a very young age, he was aware, like, this doesn't seem right. You know, there's no real reason she's not around. It just seems odd. He knew that even as a young kid.
She wanted to sleep in. Can you blame her?
Well, so then he was a terrible student, I guess, didn't like school. And so he ran away when he was young to pursue music. And that's where our clips start today. He's talking about his days in Chicago trying to be a performer.
That's where I got the idea that I wanted to be really in serious show business was in Chicago, in DeSable High School. I was in hijinks, you know. Mm-hmm. And we in a group I had called the Bonbons. We were in the hijinks in 1939 and it was fabulous, you know. So everybody got a big write-up in the school paper, and my group did too. So I ran away from home in 1939 to go to New York to be on Major Bowes Amateur Hour. And I did. I made it, and was in 1 second prize.
The Bonbons makes me think of Frank Reynolds' Pecan Sandies. His group in Always Sunny.
Yeah.
It was a much simpler time where even a kid from the streets is like, we'll call ourselves the Tootsie Doo Six.
That was every pre-mob gang sounded like that too back then.
Yeah, right. So that Mr. Major Bowes Amateur Hour that he's referring to was a radio show that was apparently massive at the time, and I found it. I couldn't believe there's a few episodes of Major Bowes Amateur Hour on YouTube, and I found one with 67 views. So I was like, this can't be it. This can't be the one with Redd Foxx. And I scroll around, and sure enough, it was. It had his band, the Jump Swinging Six, or whatever the hell they were. Unfortunately, Redd doesn't speak. The guy talks to one of the other band members and criticizes the band name. So I don't have that clip, but I just wanted to brag that I did manage to find it somehow against all odds.
Don't you wonder how the
clip from 1938 or whatever it was?
Yeah, the person that uploaded it, where did they get it?
That's a great question. Yeah. Been trading radio tapes for years.
Right.
So yeah, he goes to Major Bowes Amateur Hour, and to kind of play off the Bonbons thing we were talking about, the Jump Swinging Six, I think I'm getting that name right. They broke up when it came to the draft. Some people had to go to war. Redd, by the way, dodged the draft. Apparently, he said, I think he said in his book or the biography written about him. It was the story was that he ate soap because apparently it gives you heart palpitations. so that's another one of my favorite things from these old timers is the stories of them getting out of the draft.
They're all great.
Like, yeah, Lenny Bruce pretending he was gay. And
I was going to say that's the most popular one. Sir, I'm gay. Oh, gross. Get out of here.
Yeah, right. Beat it. You're not supposed to tell us that. So he did succeed a little bit in music. He got a record with a very popular jazz label. He released 5 singles, including, again, one was called like the Woogie Doogie Willie or something like that. They're all such silly, whimsical names. But Redd's life was not entirely whimsical. Is our next clip about one of his boyhood friends?
Malcolm?
Yes. Yeah, so he had a very famous friend when he was a kid, a guy that went on to greatness in many ways.
When you were a youngster, Redd.
I never was. When I was born, I was 41.
In your younger days, you knew Malcolm, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I knew him quite well. I think I knew him better than anyone, in his young days.
How long did you know him?
18 years. We were friends and partners and whatever.
What kind of business were you in?
Were we in business? Trying to escape.
That's almost like a Chappelle sketch with the voice of that guy asking, well, what kind of business were you in, sir? So yeah, we weren't exactly doing business. They were doing whatever they could to get by out on the streets back in the day. Up to no good, as they say. But yeah, they just kind of, I guess, lost touch over the years. Redd had no real interest in being part of the civil rights movement, at least not in the way that Malcolm X did. Redd basically said, I contribute in my own way, which is in many ways true, as we'll get to. He just didn't feel the need to be a social activist in the way that Malcolm X was. He'd rather get his points across on stage.
Make people laugh and say, see, even we can be funny. That's what he says.
Exactly. So I like that. That's like back in the day, it was like, well, these Afro-Americans can't do comedy. It's like they're a much funnier race of people than us. Let them on stage, you idiots.
They're the funniest, some would say.
So, all right, let me try and regroup here, get back on track. So yeah, Redd's all over the place as a kid. He's trying to make it in the music biz. Never really took off. And in the comedy world, he kind of started to realize he was funny. He hooks up with a gentleman named Slappy White, which I always thought that was just a Seinfeld reference. There's an episode of Seinfeld where Seinfeld's parents are trying to contact him at the hotel that he's not actually staying at. So they're like, they said there was no Jerry Seinfeld staying there. And he goes, well, I can't stay under my own name. Of course, I stay under the name Slappy White. And I always thought that was just a silly thing that, Larry or Jerry liked. But it turns out he was a real comic from back in the day, which is another, that's more of a, you don't hear that name in comedy as much as that. It seems like a second baseman for the White Sox or something.
Yeah, like 1938.
Yeah, a number 2 hitter, Slappy White. So they partnered up and were a comedy duo. The comparison that I read was basically they were a black version of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. So, you kind of had the sleek, cool guy and the, wacky, silly, funny one.
So they're kind of like bumping mics, but back then.
Oh, yeah. You could say that in a way.
Yeah.
They, by the way, I think they remained friends for many years. Slappy White was on Sanford and Son, but they did have beef for a long time. They toured with a woman named Dinah Washington, who was also a childhood friend of Redd Foxx's. And Slappy White ended up taking a gig with her without Redd's knowledge, and there was a lot of resentment there. People taking advantage of Redd and disrespecting him is a very common theme throughout his life. I would say I don't think we've talked about a figure I've felt this bad for or empathized with since the Three Stooges episode.
Yeah, because
I think the Stooges still take the cake.
Yeah, because typically you'll be like, well, I mean, this is out of there. For him, it's like he couldn't have done anything different.
Right. Yeah, well, so he becomes sort of, a cult figure in this underground comedy world. In 1956, he released Laugh of the Party, which is his first of many party albums. He became known as King of the Party Album. And this is interesting and, historic for many reasons. One being Redd Foxx is credited as the first guy that's ever done his act on stage, recorded it, and put it out. So it's the first time you're hearing on a record, the audience laughing and things like that. So people are like, whoa, what is it? It's revolutionary. People are like, what is this?
I did not know that.
Yes. And also, I called it a party album, which I correctly assumed meant people would play it at parties. Party albums were, records that the adults would play when the kiddies have gone to bed. Maybe a little risque. But in my mind, the more interesting aspect of these party albums is so the way you would, buy a party album back in the day, they were not on shelves anywhere because Redd Foxx was so filthy for the time. And anyone else of that ilk, these other party albums, they were considered so dirty for the time that you couldn't put them on the shelf. People would be outraged. So it was essentially like a drug deal. You'd have to go into the record store and you'd have to, look around, make sure no one was watching and say, hey, is the fox in the hen house? And the guy would slide you a paper bag. I don't think you actually had to use code, but you would have to like be discreet about it, and they would put it in a paper bag so that no one saw you walking out with it.
Sneak out with a 12-inch record.
Yeah. But these were crazy popular. This is Redd's first success. Laugh of the Party Volume 1. Sold like hotcakes, so much so that this is unprecedented. Louis C.K., eat your heart out, my friend. You think putting out one special a year is revolutionary? Redd Foxx, between 1956 and 1958, put out 14 party albums.
Oh my God.
The guy, I don't know that he talked in those 2 years without it being recorded. And I believe the number that I read was 50 in total. 50 party albums he put out in his entire career. So
Jesus. Was it
an insane amount of material Redd Foxx has put out there. And it's interesting because I remember, like, my dad, when I was young, I remember my dad referring to Redd Foxx as like a hilarious, filthy guy. But what I thought was most interesting about him was I assumed right out of the gate, it's fuck, shit, piss, cunt. He evolved with the times where, like, in 1956, he's dirty for 1956. I think he referred to like a woman's ass, but it's not like a ton of cursing. So if you listen to it now, you're like, this is extremely mild. So it's funny if you go and listen to Laugh of the Party. It's on YouTube if you want to go find it. But it's funny to listen and be like, you had to, knock 3 times and a guy slid you this record. But I think that's our next clip, right?
No, him talking about Working Blue.
Oh, well, let's hear that, because that kind of applies as well.
Yeah, it's him talking about it.
At the time I started, I was working in Baltimore at a club called Gamby's, and all dock workers, longshoremen, and prostitutes, stuff like that, just frequent the place. And I was telling those Cinderella stories, I call them, those nice cleanies, and people didn't react to them. So the manager, Frank Reddish, he was one of them kind of soft-spoken black dudes, but severe, and he meant every word he said, and he cursed all the time. So he said, why don't you tell some stuff these people want to hear, something about working down the docks or something about nightlife. So I got some stories together for him that Saturday night, and that was just a sensation, I went over so great, and he shot pistols and everything all up in the ceiling. Yeah, so I said, well, this is it, So ever since then, I didn't consider it dirty stories. I considered it stories that it's human beings that live and react to this kind of stuff. So let's give it to them. There's a lot of places in the ghettos where I can work, and I worked steady for a long time.
Do you think when Tom Myers lands a joke, they're shooting pistols into the ceiling in Baltimore?
Different reason, yes. So what's interesting, though, what I found interesting about that is, and we've done it on this podcast many times, you always hear Lenny Bruce get the credit for breaking a lot of those barriers with language and, literally getting arrested for things he was saying on stage. And, I didn't find anything about Redd. I mean, he got arrested for other things in his youth, but I didn't find anything about him getting arrested for what he was saying on stage. And listening to Laugh of the Party, my first thought was like, maybe he kind of walked that line.
Yeah.
Where, he was going right up to the edge, but not cracking it. But then the other thing I kind of realized is he's playing black clubs. And I wonder if that at that time, the police didn't even give a fuck,
Or
like if he wasn't at a whereas in a white establishment, they're like, how dare you? But in a black establishment, they're like, be as filthy as you want. Who cares?
That's what I was going to say. They're not getting ratted on. It's
an interesting form of freedom in that way. You know what I mean? It's freedom in its discrimination in a bizarre, backwards way.
Yeah, exactly. The next same interview, it's him talking about his big break.
Oh yeah, so this is long before, not long before, but this is before Sanford and Son. This is the first time he was brought on television.
Did that, when your reputation started to grow and more white people began to come to see you, did that hinder the possibility of you becoming a star in the white community because
Oh,
you were
yeah.
doing that material?
They all ask me not to do those kind of jokes. And I tell them, to forget it.
What was your first break on television? Who gave it to you?
Hugh Downs, I think I would say, gave me the first shot. That was on the Today Show on NBC. And Hugh was the, the moderator. And that night he was working Johnny Carson's show because Johnny was on vacation again. And so Hughes, after I was interviewed by Hugh on the Today Show, he said, look, I'll take you on the Tonight Show with me tonight. And he did. And I said it was a short of being a sensation as far as they were concerned because they never knew this guy who had sold 5 million albums and a lot of people never saw him. So from then, Nick brought me back the following week when Johnny came back. And that's when Johnny asked me about who was the funniest young black comedian coming up. And so I said, Flip Wilson. I said, you get Flip on and you'll be really thankful. You'll never look back. And it was true. Flip got on the show and a week later he was hijacked to Cuba. And luck would have it, he got a career going much faster than I had a chance. But after he got a break, he gave me quite a few shots on his show, and we're good friends now.
So it's interesting where Redd is kind of talking about his first opportunity there. And in that, once he got on with Carson, he, goes out of his way, but he does what he can to promote Flip Wilson, who's a young black comedian at the time. Whereas the black comedians that came before Redd didn't do anything for him. And now it might have been tougher for guys like Cosby and Dick Gregory to have gotten Redd opportunities. But people in comedy in general, it's a weird thing where Redd has this trend until late in his life of not getting the respect that he deserves. Because even there you hear, so for anyone that doesn't know, Hugh Downs was he was essentially the first Ed McMahon of the Tonight Show before Carson got there, and then wound up hosting the Today Show. So Redd's first ever television appearance, which a lot of people thought was bizarre because he's the king of the party record, his first television appearance was at 7:00 in the morning, and people were very nervous about that. But Redd was always very smart, and in another interview that I watched, I saw Redd they were crediting him for, they were like, you've never been bleeped on television. Is that right? They never have to bleep you? And he's like, no, because I'm aware of where I am. If I'm on a show or I can curse, that's what I do. If I'm on HBO, then I'll say fuck and shit all day. But if I'm on the Today Show, I'm aware it's 7:00 in the morning. It's a different audience. So I clean it up. He was a true pro in that way.
Yeah. I like that he when someone said who's the funniest black comedian coming up, nowadays any comic was asked that question, they'd be like, me, obviously. They'd just be selfish.
Or why did you say black? Or it would be a whole
yeah.
Or he's like, it's Flip Wilson.
Yeah. Oh, I got the answer.
But the point of my story was the first guy that had him on the Tonight Show after that was Hugh Downs. Hugh Downs is like, hey, he can do it at 7:00 in the morning. Obviously, he can do it at 11:30 at night. So it's a weird thing where Johnny wasn't the first guy to have him on the Tonight Show, which I'm sure that happened for plenty of people. But it's just a line of disrespect where Dick Gregory and Bill Cosby ended up guest hosting the Tonight Show. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not sure if Dick Gregory did. Cosby certainly did. But Redd Foxx never got that opportunity. And he was always very bitter about that, particularly eventually being the biggest star on NBC. So there's a lot of things, and maybe part of it was because he was dirty. He eventually gets the label of difficult to work with, which we'll talk about. But he never quite got the respect that he deserved, certainly in the early days anyways.
Now we're at Laugh of the Party.
Yeah, so, we'll play it. Like I said, the only other one that he does say, he refers to women's asses. But this is the closest I could find to something that currently might be considered, raunchy, I guess. I don't know. It's just funny to listen to a 1950s album and be like, this is this was filthy?
Thank you very much. I can see you going to warm up. You folks are really going to be all right. So I like to do some of the good stuff that I have. I'd like to do a couple of pieces that I had the pleasure of plugging in New York. Well, really, I'm sincere. I really would. Pieces like Laura, Marie, and Margie. Those were good pieces. Yeah, I plugged all those pieces. I was a song plugger back east. I plugged all them. I plugged Old Gray Mare, but she ain't what it used to be. Yeah, I worked for the company a long time, and finally one day they got up enough nerve to ask me to plug Jim, and I quit.
So yeah, like I said, I mean, he was talking about fucking there, obviously, and then makes kind of a gay joke at the end. So that would be considered like, you know, I don't know, maybe the network might have a problem with it, but like, it doesn't seem crazy dirty. So that's all I'm saying is it's funny to go back and listen to something that was considered like vulgar in the 50s.
It's considered vulgar, and it sounds like edits someone would make to a Tonight Show now.
Exactly. Yeah, that seems like a guy cleaning it up,
right?
For like Dave Attell cleaning it up for NBC or something,
right?
So, by the way, in our timeline, Redd is already on his second marriage. He got married when he was very young. Turns out too young. He was also, you know, pursuing an entertainment career, and that, you know, just got in the way of that. So I believe his first marriage only lasted about 3 years. And then he was married a few years later. So that happens. But we'll talk about the success of that marriage a little while later. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here.
This is him talking about Sanford and Son.
Yeah, so now he started to make his way into the mainstream because he got a record on Frank Sinatra's record label. So now, you know, now he's in with the whites, which was a big deal in the 60s, baby. And I believe that record sold over 1 million copies. So now he's got some kind of mainstream appeal, and he's in with Sinatra. Also, in, I believe, 1967, he's successful enough to be the first black business owner in Beverly Hills when he opened Redd Foxx's Comedy Club, which is where, you know, everyone associates Richard Pryor with the Comedy Store. But Redd Foxx's in Beverly Hills is where Pryor actually started. And in season 2 of Sanford and Son, Redd Foxx brought on young writers Richard Pryor and Paul Mooney. So he gave them their start in many ways. But first, let's hear about how he got Sanford and Son.
The other thing I think that I've never heard you explain how you actually came to get the part of Fred Sanford on Sanford and Son. I mean, we know this is one of the biggest hits in television of that era. How did it come your way in terms of the business?
Well, Cleavon Little and we worked in Cotton Comes to Harlem, so he was out in Hollywood, so someone mentioned something that they were going to do a series from England. You know, it was taken from Steptoe and Son.
Right.
So Cleavon mentioned to the producers that I had just played a junk man in Cotton Comes to Harlem. Uncle Bud, that was my role. But I didn't get no name. My name wasn't even on the screen credits in that movie because they never expected me to have a part as important as it was. But it was a major part of the movie. But the producers got in touch with me, and I went down and did Fred Sanford, but then it was called Steptoe and Son. So I said, well, my name is Sanford, so they can't use the name Steptoe and Son. I said, well, Sanford and Steptoe had the same kind of sound, the rhythm. So it became Sanford and Son. And Fred G. Sanford was my brother who passed about 20 years ago.
Wow,
so I used his name, Fred G. Sanford. Yeah.
So at this time, Amos and Andy was the only, like, you know, quote, black show that had been on television at that point. So networks were very nervous, and All in the Family had just started on CBS. And so Norman Lear wanted to pitch this show to CBS and said, hey, I got another one for you. CBS said, we don't want a black show. And it wasn't, what's interesting about that, and credit to Norman Lear, which we'll get into why I don't think Norman Lear deserves credit for everything he gets necessarily. But credit to Norman Lear. So apparently, like Redd said there, it was originally a British show called Sanford and Son. Same with All in the Family. All in the Family was originally a British TV show adapted to, America. And originally, I believe they wanted like an Italian family or something. Mm-hmm. And when they came across Redd Foxx, they said, we'll just make it a black family. This is our guy. And so when CBS said, I don't know, they stood by Redd and said, no, we want to do it this way. And they went to NBC, and NBC was a little hesitant, and they stuck to their guns, which is, you got to give Norman credit, because at that time it would be so much easier to be like, fine, it's Italians then. Who gives a fuck? You're
going to pay me still?
Yeah. So Redd obviously got the job despite the networks being afraid of having a black family on television. And Sanford and Son was also known as the Brady Bunch killer because they went up against the Brady Bunch. I think they were both on Friday nights in the same time slot. And what it came to be was that the Brady Bunch represented, I guess, maybe what families would like to be, rural, suburban, everything's nice and tidy. Even the fact that the both parents are divorced. There's never a real marital strife. There's no issues with the other parents. You never hear about where they are or anything. So it's kind of like this perfect, white picket fence type of picture. Whereas Sanford and Son, obviously was relatable to black families at that time, but even white families could look at it and say like, oh, these are real human beings that we would interact with. Whereas the Brady Bunch was a fantasy of an American family.
It's so funny. It wasn't even that long ago. People were like, oh, they're real humans.
Yeah, right. Well, because you forget, like, it's not that many years before where, like, and even at this time, couples were sleeping in different beds on television.
Right.
And you couldn't say pregnant. You couldn't talk about pregnancy. So it's a weird time, but, Redd Foxx and Norman Lear were integral in developing that process. Now, the reason I'm critical of Norman Lear is because, well, first of all, I champion our boy, Eric Monty. We still fight for justice for Eric Monty.
That's right.
If you go back to the Norman Lear episode.
That's right.
We're Team Eric Monty all the way. But what Eric Monty said about Norman Lear kind of rings true in my research of Sanford and Son, because you'll hear Norman Lear put this label of difficult on Redd and kind of take credit for some of the things that Redd was pushing for. So while I do think Norman Lear did a tremendous amount for black people in the television business, I also think he kind of stole valor a little bit. There's a little bit of him taking credit for things he didn't necessarily do, and also not giving people the opportunities that maybe he should. Also, I should say that I'm looking at through the lens of 2023, where it's a hell of a lot easier for me to say, well, why don't you just let Redd Foxx do everything? Right. Whereas Norman Lear is dealing with network executives that are genuinely racist, and he has to deal with all the politics of that. So
I can't look at that. I'm busy fucking this 18-year-old girl who wants a job.
Right. Yes. They had a lot of irons in the fire back then.
Right.
All right. So what's next?
This is him talking about writing contributions from our favorite guy who just asks about white people the whole time.
I think this is John Barber, right? This is the same guy?
Yeah.
This is John Barber, he comes off as a real dork, but Redd seems to like him.
In Sanford and Son, do you make many contributions to the material that goes into the script? And then how would white producers and white directors and writers react to those contributions?
Well, at first I was having a little difficulty making contributions, because I'd make a suggestion and I'd run into a brick wall. But we hang a little looser now over on the set. If I have some contributions, at least they're considered, and I make quite a few changes in the script just to show the true side. Different little sayings we have, like don't sit on the bed and stuff like that. Well, whites don't know that blacks are superstitious or whatever superstitious, or whether it's just the way you're brought up. You don't sit on the bed, you don't put hats on the bed, stand up in the house because they got a thing that say you make the house poor. Little things that we have, traditions and things that you have to realize and make the show honest. People will tune in to see themselves that way.
And I think the big one that he pushed for that he doesn't mention there is they were, I don't know if they were the first, but they were the first to do it in the way that they did with use of the N-word on television. Because Redd at a certain point said the way you're writing this is not how black people would talk. This is not how we would refer to each other. And they would say, well, you wouldn't want me saying that on television, would you? And he's like, no, of course not, but I can say it. And so he pushed for, like he's saying there with, different things on set and behaviors. He would also do it with language where he's like, yeah, no, listen, Norman Lear, I understand you're giving me a great opportunity, but you don't have any idea how black people talk to their families. I do. So these are the things I'm going to say. Now, because of stuff like that, Redd Foxx was labeled as difficult. And I also heard this is where I started to turn on Norman Lear, where in an interview, Norman Lear said that one of he was talking about Redd being difficult and always credited him for being very funny, but did say he was difficult. And one of the examples he gave was, he's like, Redd, his dressing room didn't have a window, so he would make a big fuss. Even though I explained to him, we can't change the structure of the building to put in a window for you. And Redd's point that Norman never understood was no. My point is I'm on the NBC's #1 show. At a certain point, they were #2 in the country behind All in the Family. And I'm in prime time. Meanwhile, Johnny Carson has an entire floor and you've put me in a closet. That's the point that Redd was making, that Norman Lear saw differently. And, I wasn't there, but that's where I was kind of like, maybe Norman's not the beacon of progression that he kind of steals valor for.
Just stealing from left and right.
Damn straight, baby. And someone that listened to the Norman Lear episode recently reached out to me. I thought we did mention this, but maybe we didn't. The ideas for Sanford and Son and All in the Family were both originally British shows. Now, that doesn't mean Norman Lear stole them. That's public. Now, everyone knows that. It wasn't like, oops, I guess it was a British show first. Everyone was aware of that. But it is noteworthy because you're talking about a guy who's considered such a trailblazer when both those shows were already happening in England. But the thing Norman Lear did do that no one else did is put both Sanford and Son and the Jeffersons on television. So that's definitely a feather in the guy's cap.
Imagine going up to somebody and being like, just so you know, The Office, it's not American.
Like, well, the thing is okay, but they're not thieves. It's a different show.
Yeah, right. I think all it is basically the premise, and that's about it.
Right.
Next we have that video talking about the contract dispute with the overdubbing guy voice.
Yeah, so these are quotes that were in text. I just figured it was better to have this gentleman read them. And this is from a YouTube channel called Comedy Hype News. And they do a pretty good job. I think they cover specifically black comedians because every time we're doing an episode on a black comedian, I find clips from them, and only when we cover a black comedian. Never any other time. So I'm assuming that's what the channel is, but they do a good job with some of this stuff.
They didn't talk about Lucille Ball at all?
Not that I found, anyways. So this is some of the stuff from Redd's contract disputes. Oh, I will first throw in that another thing that gave Redd the label of difficult was, and to be fair, he was at times difficult, like, wouldn't show up for rehearsals and things like that. But with these contract disputes, as you listen to them, just keep in mind that like there's episodes of Sanford and Son that Redd isn't on because of these, like he just walked out. He's we'll talk about a lot of the guys he influenced, but apparently he also influenced NFL wide receivers because he was just like, I'm not showing up until you pay me. And he was kind of one of the first guys in TV to do that. But Carroll O'Connor did the same thing. And Carroll O'Connor was the highest paid guy in television. And I don't remember hearing a lot of things referring to him as difficult. So just keep that in mind as we talk about these contract difficulties he dealt with.
Klugman did this, and wasn't he labeled difficult?
Klugman, same thing, missed episodes, which it's bizarre. I guess there's examples of it happening now, but it's weird to think, like, I don't know, episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond where Ray Romano just isn't there. It's weird.
those side quest episodes that everyone hates.
Yeah, never fun, but
this is about the contract disputes.
Yep.
I asked for 25% of the show. They wanted to give me 25% of the producer's pie and said it would take 5 years before I could get a piece of the show. Well, they want to make me look like an idiot. They know I have a winner, and I had one from the start. You see, when they gave me the show, they had about 25 million black folks to start off with as a viewing audience. The show has made millions. They wanted to sell the show to Columbia for $11 million. When a show is syndicated, I want to have a piece of it. I figured that if I had 25% of the show, I could make $1 million a year for the next 10 or 12 years. Fox defended his demands by stating he's been in show business for 38 years and he still gets treated like a beginner.
And that's the feeling of disrespect he always dealt with. And you can hear it even more when he talks later in life. I listened to a few of his interviews, and it's almost like at that point, he's kind of like, it's a foregone conclusion. He's just kind of over it. He's like, yeah, that's just how it was. Like, he never got the respect he felt like he deserved. He was nominated for an Emmy. He lost to Carroll O'Connor. And like you said, the show was extremely successful for 5 seasons. Could have lasted a lot longer, but he walked away. Now, he's also criticized for, and this is again where, like, I'm not completely disregarding the fact that he may have been difficult to deal with, because like he didn't tell his co-stars he was leaving. He just cost these people jobs, their livelihood, right, because of his own disputes. So yeah, there are things, and his co-star, Damon Wilson, I believe his name is. Hope I'm getting that right. He was like pissed about this, and he says, I've always respected Redd, but like he was very pissed that Redd didn't at least talk to him about this, so they could have maybe formulated a plan or something. All these people were just out of jobs after 5 seasons when that show probably could have lasted a lot longer. However, in the thing we just heard there, you hear him being trying to be very smart. He wasn't always smart with his money, which we'll talk about. But in this instance, he was very smart and had the foresight to be like, no, syndication is where the money's at. I don't know if a lot of people in 1975 were saying that necessarily.
Yeah, it wasn't really a thing yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was technically, but, the Seinfeld deals haven't come to fruition yet. So that's good foresight on Redd's part to be like, hey, I could just coast if you give me the syndication money. Which is what he was fighting for.
It is Damon Wilson.
Damon Wilson. Yeah. Okay.
This is more excerpts from that, but talking about network mistreatment.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a little bit we'll hear about the dressing room thing I was talking about.
According to Damon Wilson's memoir, Second Banana, the bittersweet memoir of the Sanford and Son years, he said, "We were breaking ground, we were making history, but when we first came to NBC, we didn't even have dressing rooms, except on a shoot day. We were dressing in the men's room when our first show aired. Redd and I were making history, and they tried to deal with us like we were third-class field hands."
Yeah, and so, like Norman Lear kind of tried to make it out like, oh, Redd's being a prima donna, where it's like, well, I mean, Norman, No, I guess my point is, and this is, actually Louis just had a great bit about this on his news special where he talks about, slavery. And he's like, obviously now, like, slavery is wrong, but we say that never living in a time where you could own slaves. He's like, it's not like we're looking at our neighbors bringing in our groceries like, jeez, I wish I had a slave. So to be fair, I'm not growing up in the time that Norman Lear is living in. So easy for me to judge. But there is a thing where Norman Lear in some ways was part of the problems. And you hear that with people like Eric Monti, who have voiced their frustrations about Norman Lear over the years and said that, and even in one interview Norman gave, he gives Redd credit for bringing in like Richard Pryor and Paul Mooney. But the way he says it, he's like, Redd was at the forefront of bringing in black writers, but we were right behind him. We were that was one of our goals. And it's like, okay, but Redd pushed for them, right? So what are you really taking credit for?
Next,
I got beef with Norman Lear is my point.
Rightfully so.
And he's still alive. So if he wants to come on this show and confront me anytime, old man.
That would actually be great. What? His caretakers are black in the background of the Zoom call, and you're like, I knew it.
I think he's 99, Norman Lear. So
something like that.
We're coming for you, you old bastard.
Next one, same thing. Last one. He's talking about leaving NBC.
All right.
I wasn't stolen. I just floated away on a lake of bewilderment. I was just fed up. I never had a chance to do a special at NBC. I never got a chance to host the Tonight Show like everybody else in the business. I asked for a chance to produce, but they wouldn't let me. I wanted to grow, but they wouldn't let me. Don't you know many black youngsters watch me every week and know I should win something? They're not idiots. Those kids know Sanford or Redd Foxx hasn't won anything. A whole nation of black people keeps watching for a hero and none comes, man. It will take their minds off a whole lot of things if you give them some winners. We were the #1 show at NBC for 6 years, and you think that they would nominate us. Can you believe it? The whole thing ought to be investigated. I don't mean just Sanford and Son. What about the other black shows like The Jeffersons, That's My Mama, and Good Times? Never a mention of them at the Emmys.
And, the point that a lot of people make is it's interesting because even I thought, I didn't realize Sanford and Son was on before The Jeffersons. I feel like The Jeffersons gets more credit for being that kind of groundbreaking show. But it's like Sanford and Son depicting a poor black family or, lower middle class, whatever they were. That opens the door for the Jeffersons and the Cosby Show and Fresh Prince. These, upper middle class families and people that can, just present themselves the way any other show would. You needed Sanford and Son in order for, the country to kind of accept that, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way it was.
Yep. And just for the record, this July, Norman Lear will be 101 years old. So come on, guy.
He is alive, right?
Yeah.
I've been getting these wrong lately. So
yeah, he's alive.
Okay, good.
Next we have taxes.
Well, this is where we get into some muddy waters here. This is where we start talking about the kind of the downslide of old Redd, because kids, you got to pay your taxes.
Taxation is theft. I'm with Redd.
I'm with him too. And apparently, according to his biographer, he was like, no, it was all to stick it to the man, which I'm sure some of it was to keep his money, but.
What a character, Redd Foxx, that boy. He wouldn't pay his taxes. So the government came there one night when all the people in the room just took everything, went to his house, took everything. They took a ring off his finger. They took his shoes. They took it.
Sorry. I should have set this up better. This is John Witherspoon on Rogan.
Yep.
And at this point that John Witherspoon's talking about, he still has Redd Foxx's comedy club that I was referring to earlier. I purposely didn't spoil it for you so we could hear this story.
Took a ring off his finger. They took his shoes. They took it and left him a chicken raw to cook in the oven. And so they shut him down. The place he had, I think it was on La Cienega somewhere.
It was in L.A., yeah.
In L.A., yeah. So he crying. He called Sammy Davis. Sammy called Frank Sinatra, and he told him, they took everything I own. I worked so hard to be who I am. I owe the taxes. It ain't that bad. They took everything. So Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and some other friends went to his club and worked 2 or 3 weeks every night, 2 shows, sold them out to get enough money to get his taxes and get his club back. He was so happy to everybody. He said, "Oh my God, I want to thank you for doing this for me. Oh, please just take my hug. Let me just hug you," hugging everybody. So they all went on their separate ways. Redd Foxx still didn't pay his fucking taxes.
No!
They come back again with a lean on his ass. You son of a bitch.
Come on, Red.
Wow, that was the coolest story until right there at the end.
I know. Jesus, Red. And that's, we all could have celebrated Frank. A white guy comes to the rescue,
Yeah.
But no such luck. And they said Cosby also, I guess, tried to help out Red with the old.
He was like, "No, thanks."
I know what you're up to, motherfucker.
Not in my club.
No, Cosby tried to help him out, I guess, as well. But yeah, shout out to Sinatra because the famous story is him refusing to stay in hotels that wouldn't have Sammy Davis Jr.
Right.
So I feel like this is what I'm talking about. Is Norman Lear was no Frank Sinatra. How's that? That's the point I'm trying to.
Beautifully said.
All right. So, to kind of pile on to this tax situation, Red was not only taken advantage of in Hollywood, he was also taken advantage of in his own home because they always said he traveled with a true entourage. He always had, kind of hangers on around, people that he grew up with, family, things like that. And he was a real sucker. He always had people with their hand out, and he was a guy who, people on the show, like I think Luanda Page, he came up in comedy with, and like I said, Slappy White, he met when he was very young. So he kept people around that like he was friends with from a young age. And, Luanda Page and Slappy White didn't take advantage of him, but many others did, I guess. And that's a classic story. Like I said, referring to that 30 for 30, that's a tale as old as time, is people getting rich and wanted to do right by, people they grew up with. And the people in their life don't have the sense to say, all right, that's enough. No, thank you. We don't need that much from you.
Right.
Now, it wasn't all generosity and sunshine and roses. Red also enjoyed the finer things. He wore a lot of expensive jewelry. He had a lot of expensive cars. He had multiple homes, which when you're making the kind of money Red was making at a time, that's all well and good. But if you don't pay your taxes, they scoop those things up toot sweet.
What a buzzkill not paying taxes after that. I'd been so pissed if I was Frank Sinatra.
What the fuck, man? Wasted my time.
Brutal.
Also in 1975, before Sanford and Son was done, he gets his second divorce. And I imagine that cost a pretty penny because that was at the peak of his money-making days. Mm. And at that time, he was also a real cocksman. Apparently, I don't know that you would necessarily guess it by looking at him or listening to him, but Redd Foxx was a real smooth talker and a ladies' man. So I guess the second wife got sick of his infidelity, said, hit the bricks. So marriage number 2 is done. And then within a couple of years, he's married again. So he's on his third marriage now.
And Sinatra was like, what the fuck, dude?
Buddy, I'm trying here. I only have so many weeknights I can play.
I like the idea of every time Redd Foxx screws up, Frank Sinatra's just pissed.
Yeah. I mean, so they did a a spin-off of Sanford and Son years later, just called Sanford, and that bombed. Also, the Redd Foxx show didn't do very well. And I'm imagining Frank just shutting off his TV in anger. Like, God damn it.
Redd, come on.
All right, what's next?
This is one of his specials, the musical Open.
So this is just something I thought was weird. We're taking a diversion from the story aspect of Redd Foxx's life and just talking about his comedy for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I wanted to play this is because I mentioned it with Don Rickles a couple weeks ago. And I said, when I saw this, I was like, you know what? We got to pull this, because I mentioned in the Don Rickles documentary, Mr. Warmth, they show a lot of clips of his stand-up. And he comes out in like with a song and dance number. And you're like, Don, is that Don Rickles?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. This one I thought was even weirder. Now, it made a little more sense once I learned that Redd had a background in music.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it any less bizarre to watch.
Sit back, relax, and get ready for a thrill. Let's get our hands together, bring to the stage the one and only Redd Foxx. Hey,
It's a comedy special.
Comes out smoking a butt, looks cool as hell.
Yeah.
Chicago.
This sounds like Louis Armstrong.
Chicago, I'll show you around. Bet your bottom dollar you lose your blues in Chicago.
All right, you get the point before we get demonetized for his great pipes there.
Yeah.
But isn't that bizarre? Like, imagine it was just a different time. So I'm not shitting on Redd here. I just find it so weird that this opened a comedy show.
So I was going to say, back then they would do music. Then they kind of started doing sketches almost to start comedy specials.
Yes.
At some
there
point.
were intros for a long time. Finally, we've gotten to the point where we just get right to it.
They just start with the jokes now. It's nice.
Yeah. I'm just imagining like Chris Rock coming out like that.
Well, Dice has done that.
Yeah. Has he?
I believe so. He did like a sketch and a song and stuff. It was weird.
To start a special, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I'll find it. I'll figure out which one I'm talking about.
But it's also funny just because like then this is the material Redd has after his dance number.
People have said I was dirty because I've said shit, fuck. Well, to me, fuck is not dirty. Fuck is only dirty when you don't wash up. Now, believe that if there's any prudes here. I could say intercourse, but if you're doing it right, you fucking. Fellas, tell the truth. In your whole life, you never heard a girl say, oh, intercourse me. Intercourse me. No, they don't say that. Girls are clever. Because they know if they said intercourse me, your worm might fall. So they tell it like it is. Fuck me! Oh, yeah. Hold it right there. Don't move it.
I also think saying your worm might fall for losing your erection is a term I'm definitely going to start using.
That's also him going, am I on TV? I can't remember.
Your worm might fall. But I'm also willing to accept that maybe it's some sort of dichotomy that's flying right over my head, where he starts with this like sweet dance number and then he just talks about fucking. I think his opening bit in that special is about like puking or something.
I want to see like the guys that go there for the like, oh, his comedy's so funny, it's so dirty, and he starts like going skibby dabby bop.
Yeah, guys in Vegas.
Yeah.
But that's the thing though. That's what showbiz was back in the day. You had a little mix of everything.
True.
So yeah, you play Vegas and make a shit ton of money, but for a long time it all went right to the tax man, unfortunately. But you hear that. So I think Redd, there's an interesting thing where like sometimes I do say it's unfortunate. It's like when there's a black quarterback in the draft, they'll always be compared to Michael Vick, Cam Newton, who it's always a black quarterback that they're compared to.
Mm-hmm.
I always think that with comedians where like black comics are always compared to black comics. But in fairness, like the reason that happens so often with Redd Foxx and the people he influenced is because he was literally breaking down barriers for a lot of these people.
Right.
So there's a clear line when you go from Redd Foxx to Richard Pryor to Eddie Murphy to Chris Rock. I think there's a clear, like, each of those four guys was their generation's voice of black comedy, pretty much. And Chappelle, obviously, but I think in a very different way. I don't think of Chappelle as quite as similar to those other four guys. Actually, I think Tracy Morgan is probably more similar to Redd Foxx than Chappelle is. But also, like, I mean, again, speaking of influences, I think Bernie Mac, like, and the reason it made me think of it is because I think Bernie Mac, just like his cadence and everything, he sounds a lot like Redd Foxx. And you can tell even the Bernie Mac show, I think there was influence from like Sanford and Son.
Definitely.
But all it made me think of is if like right before the famous Def Jam, I Ain't Scared of You Motherfuckers set, if Bernie was doing the old soft shoe to, he comes out doing the Charleston to an old standard.
I was going to say he's tap dancing. That's his thing.
Yeah.
Next we got Redd just talking about his marriages.
Yeah. So like I said, taxes, that's probably the worst of it, but it doesn't help that money is flying out of his bank account every few years. Well, I will say marriage number 2 lasted 17 years, to be fair.
It's a good length.
Don't enjoy it.
Have you messed up money?
No, I don't think I messed it up, but I gave a lot of it away to people. You know what I mean? Just a soft touch.
How many times have you been married now?
Let's see. 3. And I shacked up a few times. But hey, that's like...
You're a real romantic guy.
No, I'm not. I'm just a good provider. That's why. I mean, girls are attracted by me because I'm not stingy. Whatever I got goes. Let's have it. Boom, bye. Enjoy life.
By the way, Redd, I like it.
I like that.
I like his attitude. Unfortunately, his checking account was about 89 cents at this time, but I do like his attitude. And then in 1991, he got into his 4th marriage, which ended much better than the first 3. That is the year he died as well. So, and the sad thing is, like, a woman marries 68-year-old Redd Foxx in 1991. Your first thought is probably like, oh, there's a gold digger, but Redd had no money at that time, so she probably inherited nothing but debt, if anything.
Maybe the rights to his name or something.
Maybe. I'm not sure, but we'll get more into that in a moment.
We have 2 clips left, but this is...
Oh, yeah, so we're getting right to it, basically. So I mentioned Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy and the clear influence there. And Eddie Murphy was great at... he was the next generation's Frank Sinatra in this regard. He said, hey, Redd Foxx was a huge influence to me. I want to help this guy. So he did everything he could to like kind of find parts for Redd Foxx. So he makes the movie Harlem Nights. It was a big deal because it had the 3 generations of influential black voices with Redd Foxx, Richard Pryor, and Eddie Murphy all being in the same movie. And Della Reese was also in that movie, which led to Eddie Murphy having another idea as to how to make Redd a few bucks.
This particular time, she got caught on this side. And so sensibly, she started handing out the props where she was. And Redd says, where's my orange? And I said, she's on the way with the orange. You better bring the orange. I said, she's on the way with the orange. She's coming with the orange. What is her name? I said, Renita. He said, Renuzit, bring me the orange, okay? I said, her name is not Renuzit. Her name is Renita. He said, Renita, Renuzit, what the difference does it make? And I said, chartreuse salmon, pink, yellow, what difference does it make when your name is Redd? And we started this conversation back and forth. Now, Richard Pryor is sitting down at the end of the table, and he's signifying. He said, Redd, you let a woman talk to you like that? What kind of man are you let a woman talk to you like that? Well, now Redd raises up and he says something else, you know. And so I'm right on him. I say, I don't remember what, but I said something else. Now Richard says, Dale, he ain't your man. Don't let him talk to you like that. He ain't giving you no money. Don't let him talk to you like that. Redd rather, and we have this. Everybody is standing around is cracking up because this is all extemporaneous and we're going at each other, going back and forth. We're friends, so we can do this with each other. So Eddie just slides down the wall. He's just sitting on the floor laughing. He said, let's take a lunch break. And he went in the trailer and he wrote The Royal Family.
Yeah, so so at first I should say, I know I mentioned it a bit, but Redd Foxx left Sanford and Son to go to ABC, where they gave him a variety show that flopped. The Redd Foxx show wasn't particularly successful. Sanford that I mentioned, which was like a spin-off of Sanford and Son, no luck. And so literally, actually just before we started here, I was watching an interview where someone asked Redd, so Redd, are you done with television? And he just goes, I think television's done with me. I don't really have a choice in the matter. But Eddie Murphy has enough juice at this time. I mean, he's like, the biggest thing in comedy, right? Late 80s, early 90s. And he says, I've got it. Like, these two would be the perfect, just the generation I grew up in. I thought of like Frank and Marie Barone. Like, they're a perfect, just old married couple, Della Reese and Redd Foxx. And in Harlem Nights, I looked up, I haven't seen the full movie, but I just looked up a couple scenes to see if there's anything worth playing on here. And there is one scene where they're telling Eddie Murphy to like go apologize to Della Reese for something. And she's playing Redd Foxx's wife. And they're like, come on, just go talk to her. And meanwhile, Della Reese is yelling something to Redd Foxx. And Redd Foxx just responds, shut up, you fat bitch. And I was like, oh, that would make a perfect television show.
That was an ad lib too, probably.
So Eddie Murphy had the idea to put this on TV. I think the first version was a different name. He wanted to call it Chest Pains, as like a kind of an homage of the Fred Sanford character always, almost having a heart attack.
I'm coming, Elizabeth.
Yeah, but Growing Pains was also on TV, so they went with The Royal Family. And then during shooting of that program, unfortunately, this happened. So Redd was dealing with a producer. Della Reese is telling this story as well. She's a very good storyteller. I enjoyed listening to her.
Me too.
But she's telling the story. There's a producer on set, and so Redd was labeled as difficult, like I said. And so in order to try and work around that, he had like handlers on this show. They would, they had producers that were basically trying to like monitor him, and they would go so far as to like trying to tell him what was funny and things like that. And so that's where this story picks up.
Entertainment Tonight came to interview Redd. And so we're rehearsing a scene, and all Redd had to do was walk across the back of my chair. We're not shooting, we're rehearsing a scene. And of course, they sent someone to walk back. And this man says, where is Redd? And I said, he's having an interview with Entertainment Tonight. I said, but he doesn't have any lines here. He just has to walk. If he's supposed to walk past, he should be in here to walk past. So he goes in there, stops their shooting, and brings Redd out. And when Redd gets out there and finds out all he has to do is walk across the back of this that anybody could have done, he becomes livid. And he falls. Well, he was always doing pratfalls. And I thought that's what he did. Everybody thought that's what he did. And he was laying on the floor, and I leaned down to him, and I put my hands on him. He said, "Get my wife, get my wife. Get my wife, get my." I said, "Somebody get paramedics, and somebody go get Mrs. Fox." And they went and got her. And they pronounced him dead. And they put him in the ambulance, and we all got in our cars and followed him to the hospital. And he came back and stayed for 4.5 hours. Now we're all sitting in the lobby of the hospital, and the doctor comes out and says, "Mrs. Fox, we've done all that we can do, and your husband is gone." And standing this close were two of the producers, and they said, "What are we going to do with this script?" This script was written for Redd and Della. So who are we going to get? Who's going to replace? She's sitting right here. They just told her that her husband was dead. And I
fucking vultures.
Oh shit!
I went absolutely insane.
Jesus. So yeah, first of all, crazy that the guy who literally his catchphrase is clutching his chest and yelling to the skies. That's how he dies. Like the sad irony of that, like people laughing as he's like, "Come on, guys. I know that's my thing, but please."
Did anyone put a bullet in that producer's head?
That's the saddest part is that, like, that seems almost like if you put that in a script, you'd be like, okay, no one's going to literally do it in the lobby of the hospital, you know? Right. It would be a criticized scene in a movie because it would be so absurd.
Not that for that too, but I mean, for interrupting that, making him furious just so he could walk by, like.
Oh, well, I didn't even think of that part. Yeah. So, like, now listen, I don't know enough about health to say it was all. I'm sure he was not in the best health or anything. But yeah, a very sad story and a tragic end to a guy who had such a great career and influenced, so much of comedy today. You know, like literally, I think if you watch Def Jam, you could easily argue that Def Jam itself, like with all the comedians that go on that show, was influenced by Redd Foxx. Like he kind of created a genre of comedy in that way, you know.
For sure. I'm gonna find several videos of Delarice talking later and just listen to him.
She's a great storyteller. We used her in one other episode.
I forget which one.
As do I. Maybe Norman Lear. I can't remember. But yeah, we used her one other time.
That might have actually been it.
Yeah. But yeah, very sad. Rest in peace, Redd Foxx. I found this very interesting. I was excited for this episode, and I think I'm happy with how it came out, I think. I hope to hear your guys' thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting as well. So if you didn't know about Redd Foxx, you know, pay homage to him. Go listen to a Redd Foxx album or watch Sanford and Son or something, because
have a heart attack.
I was underappreciated in this time.
Have a heart attack and call for Elizabeth today.
Yeah. Pour one out for old Red. Anything else we missed, do you think?
No, we haven't done a coaching tree in a while, but this would probably be like one of the bigger ones we've had.
Well, I named a bunch, but like I said, the two, if you're just talking style, the two that immediately come to mind would be Bernie Mac and Tracy Morgan, I think.
Yep.
They almost seem like they're, you know, children of Redd Foxx, like the cadence and the way they talk and everything.
I even think Chris Rock's cadence is the same. The pitches aren't the same, but the cadence is kind of similar.
Chris Rock, you almost think that more because the voice, though. The voice is very, like, he's got that way of talking.
Right.
Yeah,
I didn't bring this up when we were just talking, but that argument and then Pryor's just at the end of the table, like just that alone, the visual is so funny.
That's good. Just the idea of Pryor egging them on.
Yeah.
Come on, Red. That's not your wife. You don't have to answer to her. Don't be a pussy, Red.
That's so funny.
So, just the three of them on set must have been a bit. But the other, again, talking influence, like, if you go back and watch Redd Foxx stuff, like I said, Now Tracy Morgan's much dirtier than Redd Foxx.
Yeah.
Big J. Okerson's much dirtier than Redd Foxx. Jim Norton's dirtier than Redd Foxx. But like without Redd Foxx, those barriers aren't broken down. So
I would say though, for the time, Redd Foxx would be dirtier than those guys.
Yes. Yeah. He was dirtier in his time than most other people. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
Whereas
great.
it's commonplace now.
Yeah. It's like grading on a curve.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So shout out Redd Foxx. And if you like this episode and wish you heard it a week earlier, you get all the Why You Laughing episodes a week early on Patreon. And you also get bonus episodes. So if you want to subscribe to the old page and support the program, please do that. We're working on getting our way up to 700 patrons. So keep those numbers a-coming, baby. And if you just rather support the show for free, I get it. It's a tough economy out there. So just go to Apple, Spotify, YouTube, support the show that way, boost our numbers in the algorithm, all of that. Tell a friend. That's probably the best way to spread the show is, word of mouth. So share the podcast, tell people who might like it that there's a history comedy podcast out there that they should start. And also, if you want to support Craig and everything he does, if you've listened to this program and you like our shock jock episodes, then go listen to Very Good Show. They do a lot of wacky things over there on Very Good Show.
Sure do.
If you want to talk dirty, if you want to talk Redd Foxx influence, I mean, these boys get dirty. So go to verygoodshow.org and support their program.
Yeah, start off. Listen to us for free if you like it. Maybe go to the cheap Patreon level. We'll appreciate you.
Beautiful. And we will talk to you guys next time on Why You Laughing.
Zip it up and zip it out.